Okay, welcome into episode 4 of Healthcare Analytics Unplugged. I'm Bill Stinneford along with Peter Healey. Peter, it's the summer. Kids are at camp. Temperature here in Texas now finally around 100 degrees. That's why you decided to grow out your beard, I guess?
Perfect time to do that.
Yeah, I would be the opposite of that, but commend you for doing something new.
Gotten that question more than once.
Yeah.
Interesting timing, but we're rolling with it.
Summer good?
So far, so good. Yeah, it's been great. Definitely enjoying it and flying by.
Flying by. It always seems to be, in business, kind of a quieter time, right? People are taking vacation with their kids and doing those things, and that's exciting. But people are also beginning to, we're getting towards the end of the summer. We're going to start to do budget planning for 2026, which still sounds crazy to say 2026. Budget planning, thinking about next year. And so today, what I thought, you had a really interesting post on LinkedIn the other day that I really liked, and it talked about, you used the clash of should I stay or should I go, the imagery to kind of talk about should I build or should I buy. And I really like that because I think that is something that we see in a lot of healthcare businesses as they think about their growth. And as we talked about on the last episode, even though times are uncertain, though there's a lot of positive momentum out there, people have to grow even in uncertain times. And so as you think about 2026, you think about getting back from summer vacation and getting into the planning, the question is going to be, all right, are we doing Denovo growth? Are we doing acquisition? Are we doing some combination of both? So just to kind of start out, talk to me about why you made the post and kind of some of the things that you were trying to advocate on to healthcare businesses as they think about expansion.
So, growth is, like we've talked about, and I think everybody acknowledges, it's undeniable. You're either growing or you're dying.
Right.
And so I think especially with the back half of the year upon us, a lot of organizations that maybe kept some of their investment capital on the sidelines for the first half of the year, seeing what comes out of Washington, seeing what the larger economy does, are just getting more comfortable now with being able to put that capital to work. And so more and more now, we are seeing deal volumes start to increase. We are hearing our own clients talk about how they are closing more transactions from an affiliation perspective. And so I think all the indicators would suggest that we will see an uptick of mergers and acquisitions happening over the next, certainly through the remainder of the year, relative to what we saw in the first half. Now, the reason for the post is there are a lot of organizations that either grow both ways, through a combination of affiliation and Denovo, or some do Denovo, but maybe now because of some of those real estate costs, like we talked about before with Class A office being very hard to find, or Class A retail space being very hard to find, they're open to some affiliations if the economics make sense. And so it all ultimately boils down to both are perfectly viable opportunities or strategies rather to pursue. But it's surprising how many organizations struggle with knowing, well, which should I lead with first? And that's really the main reason for the post, because the honest answer is it depends. And I know that's total consultant speak to say, but both should be considered if you are capable, if your organization is capable of managing both of those as a growth vehicle.
What would you say for people that may, we have a wide range of people that view this, right? So what is Denovo? Just so people don't know what Denovo is.
Sure, yeah. So it's Latin for ground up. So it is a new build or the first generation of a business going into a new site. So a startup is the easy way to think about it. And of course, affiliation being the acquisition of an existing business, an existing provider, where the risk, at least on the surface, is less, because by the time you get to actually closing on that, you know exactly how that business is performing. You've seen the books, you've seen the P&L, you know the health of the business you're buying.
So that's a pro for, say, acquisition, because you're right, there's some companies that do both, but there's other companies that solely grow through acquisition, and there are others that solely grow through Denovo. I think in my experience, the ones that solely grow through acquisition, that seems to be their business model. And while there are benefits to it, I think they miss out sometimes on the benefit that a de novo strategy, or at least having that in the toolkit, has. So talk about the pros and cons of a ground up or de novo, and then pros and cons of affiliation acquisition.
So with the de novo, the biggest pro is you control every step of the process. You control what it looks like. You control who you hire. You control how you market. You control the playbook that the staff runs for whatever the business happens to be, so that it's highly repeatable. So if you have a good playbook and a good plan in place, you can stamp those out as quickly as your team can stand them up, and certainly as much budget as you have to allocate to that. So a de novo strategy is great when you like consistency and just being able to scale over time. Now, of course, the cons associated with that is it's a longer lead up time. It takes longer for those ground up businesses to hit the numbers of profitability when you're starting from scratch. And some sites hit that faster than others. But the bottom line is, in either case, it usually takes longer to get into the black than the opposite, where you're buying a business and you know exactly where you're going to start on day one.
But the startup cost is typically less.
Yes.
On a de novo as well.
You're not paying the multiple on whatever the EBITDA or the earnings of that practice happen to be. And so for sure, you're controlling those costs from an initial investment perspective.
But another downside potentially to de novo is not just the slower ramp up time, but staffing itself. Right? Actually,
you're literally starting with nothing.
You got to find the doctors, and sometimes, as we've mentioned on previous episodes, that can be a challenge.
You either got to have somebody ready to move in and run that practice, or you got to know who's practicing nearby, and do I have a compelling package that I can use to recruit and get those providers and staff into that new build and operate.
And you do see some people that have successful de novo strategies in things like dentistry, and there are others. It's not just dentistry, but where they build relationships with people coming out of schools, and they almost look at them as hiring employees, and they see the benefits.
Absolutely.
So there are strategies that. Okay, so that's de novo. You mentioned one of the pros of an acquisition is that I'm already building, or I'm buying an established practice, so I'm theoretically making money out of the gate, although I have paid a lot more money to get to that. What are some other pros or cons of an acquisition strategy?
So again, just kind of you flip everything on the de novo side. So the pro is you've already got staff. Usually, there's some kind of retention bonus or clause in the agreement that requires the provider to stay on for a certain amount of time. So you have some continuity in place to manage that. Interestingly, and this is one of the biggest things that we talk about with clients often whenever talking through an affiliation strategy, and that is the unknown of the business you're buying. And that's a weird thing to say, because you know how much they're making, you know how many patients they're seeing, you know all this stuff, but what you don't know is why. Why is that practice doing what it's doing? And the easiest way to break that down is, is that practice doing what it's doing because of the provider and the staff, or because of the trade area and the things around it that frankly would indicate you could put anybody here and they're going to be successful? And that's the answer. That's the question that most of our clients don't know before they start working with us, to then better break that down.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that in all my time here dealing with a lot of people that grow through acquisition, I think that's in general, when you talk to people who only go through acquisition, they're typically not open to analytics, because they're essentially just smiling and dialing, and they're trying to find anybody who will sell their practice. And I think that's very short-sighted. One, for the reason that you just said. Here's the short-sightedness. They look at the P&L of that practice, and that becomes the end-all be-all of what that practice is, right? So, I want to buy it because it's a good productive practice. I don't want to buy that one because it might not be doing as well. Well, what if, to your point, you knew that one half a mile away, which is not doing well, but it's in a trade area that should be doing much better, right? So it's got the dynamics to do really well, but it's not doing that well right now. So you know that if you come in with your operational consistency, your marketing consistency, that you're going to offer as some kind of service organization that's doing the back of the house and all those kind of things as part of your acquisition, one of the benefits, you know that you should be able to buy low and take that high pretty quickly, versus this one that you're going to buy for a high end because it's doing really well, but it's at its maximum level, right? Or it's doing that way, to your point, and it's not in a good trade area,
right?
But that dentist or that orthopedist or whomever has been there for 50 years, and his wife is the former mayor and all the things, right? And you cannot, no matter who you put in there, you cannot replicate success. So you buy that thinking, look at the P&L. But pretty quickly, as soon as that person's gone, and they will be gone eventually, then you're left with a really struggling practice, right? And so it's a two-dimensional way in which I think a lot of these companies look at acquisitions, and there's so much more to be able to do that. And there's actually buy low, sell high opportunities if you look at it in a different way.
So, and you're spot on, because the flip side of that is, well, if we look at a potential practice to acquire and the performance is okay, but the score is off the charts, that's a diamond in the rough.
Right.
That's the opportunity where you can buy low and significantly grow your multiple because of all the efficiencies in the back of house and the scale and all those things that any consolidator is going to bring as value add. But huge opportunity from a negotiating perspective to know, when do we get aggressive versus when do we pull back and maybe be a little more conservative, even if the dollar values are similar, two different opportunities.
That's good. So have you seen hybrid strategies that are effective for companies, healthcare companies that grow in both ways?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so talk about that.
Yeah, and not to get too sportsy with the analogies, but football season's almost upon us. We're all going to be back to, spending our Saturdays and Sundays cheering on for our favorite teams. But when you think about football, offense in particular, somebody calls a play, the offense gets it, they line up, and then they realize, oh, the defense is set up to destroy us if we run the play we were planning on. Time to call an audible. And so if you're Peyton Manning, you shout Omaha, and then everybody knows we're changing the play on the fly. And that's a perfect analogy to think about how you can effectively deploy both strategies quickly when you're out looking to grow in any given market. And so the easy way that we like to really break this down simply is by understanding where the opportunity is in any given market. And that's accounting for the competition / potential affiliations that are already practicing there. And so when you can look at a market and quite literally just flip on the hotspots, see, well, which parts of this market are the most attractive for my business? Okay, great. It's whatever, the north side of town. Well, then who is it that's practicing there that might be a good candidate? So you turn on and see where those relevant providers are. And then, of course, you look and say, well, who else is already here from a consolidator / competitor perspective? Because some of those providers, of course, are playing on a different team, and you're not going to waste your time calling an office, even if it's non-branded, that's already associated with one of your direct competitors.
Yeah.
And so by then understanding, well, which of these providers do I immediately take off the table because I know they're associated with my competition, leaves you with an acute understanding of, well, here are the people I should call in the most attractive areas of the markets that I want to be in. So there is your affiliation approach. Now, let's say your BD team goes through and every single one of those calls ends in a disqualified lead. They're not interested, they're not selling, whatever it is, none of these worked out. Well, here's the beauty is when we said that's the best area to go to, we already accounted for that competition. And so now, if this is an area where you agree we need to be, and whether it's to your broker or through whatever sources you have, there's available real estate there. Well, that's when you call your Omaha and you switch immediately and you go into Denovo mode, because it's still good accounting for the competition that's there. And it's simple when you really break it down, but the process to get there, when shown in the platform, visually makes it even easier to make that determination on which play I should be running.
Yeah. So that sounds easy enough, right? To have that kind of strategy. And, I always like to say the approach that you just took is you're using analytics to boil the ocean,
right,
if you will, to say, okay, these are the specific hotspot opportunities that I might want to be. And then now, is there anything available for me to buy that makes sense? If not, let's open Denovo. But that seems easy enough, but a lot of people have hesitancy on Denovo or vice versa, but typically it's Denovo. What are some of the common misconceptions that people have when it comes to Denovo strategy or acquisition if they're going the other way?
I mean, I think, some of those misconceptions are just, it's too hard for me, or we don't have the experience or the skill set to do it. Right. And of course, that's where partners come in at every phase, every step of the process to help advise and facilitate that. But I think that's one, is just the fear of the unknown. To cross over into a different growth strategy than what you're used to is probably the biggest, not misconception, but just the biggest hurdle to get over. And then beyond that, of course, you do have your capital costs and all of the challenges that come with real estate in particular when you got to put it together in the first place.
It's interesting. So I want to pick on something you said, not pick on it, it's a bad thing, but just go deeper. Because we've actually seen this in clients and that they're doing this well. And then even clients we're about to bring on board, right? Which is that it is a different motion, and it's a different skill set with Denovo as opposed to acquisition. So would you recommend, so people don't know what they don't know,
sure,
so they're hesitant about, say, Denovo, or obviously vice versa with acquisition. So do you see a lot of companies, do you recommend companies, if they don't have that, to bring in somebody that may have Denovo experience in your organization?
I mean, scale dictates it all, because if you're just starting out, you're wearing all those hats.
Of course.
The bigger clients that we have do have dedicated teams for each of those motions. And of course, the most successful ones can pivot very quickly, right, or hand off very quickly when they determine which opportunity they want.
Right.
But, it takes time and it takes luck to get up to that point. And so, for those that just aren't there yet, you got to kind of be comfortable operating both of those structures, if that's, if you're open to it.
We're wrapping up here, getting close to the end of episode 4. I'll give you some final thoughts, or if we haven't covered. The one thing I would say too that I think is you've touched on a little bit, but just want to reiterate, the benefit of a Denovo strategy is you don't have to teach an old dog new tricks, so to speak, right? You could have this great playbook, but when you acquire something, you acquire people who are sort of set in their ways, and they've done that. That is a much more difficult challenge to make them run your playbook, oftentimes, not all the time, oftentimes, than it is when you hire in and you say, this is how we're doing it. It's like hiring people straight out of college and you train them your system and your program, and they're much better because they understand that, versus you bringing in somebody who's 15 years of experience and they have to unlearn some of the things that they learned to other areas, which may be good things but don't apply to how you're trying to go today. So that's another point that I want to make. But as we sort of talk about this again, summer months, getting into planning for 2026. Do we do Denovo? Do we do acquisition? If we don't do Denovo, what are some of the things we do? Any parting thoughts, any final thoughts that you might have for organizations as they think about this? And even if there's somebody out there watching that says, I really would like to jump on one or the other, can I even make that plausible for 26? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is yes. Like the only way is through, in terms of just figuring it out. I think one interesting thought is when thinking about balancing both, and we've seen this come up time and time again for those affiliation first types of companies that grow first by buying a practice, is sometimes you unintentionally back into Denovo development as well. Point being, you acquire a practice, you acquire a very motivated provider who's ready to go and open their second or third practice. And now, because you partnered up, they're ready to have you help them do that. And so that's one of those scenarios where you bought the existing business and now you're going into that unknown de novo territory. And so all of these various puzzle pieces that we're talking about fit together to drive both of those strategies and those opportunities forward quickly. Last thing I'll say is, again, as 26 continues to barrel towards us here, on the affiliation side in particular, as existing business owners, small business owners, the practice owners themselves, start to think about the future in terms of like years, it's only going to continue to present more and more exit opportunities. And so part of that dual strategy can be, by the practice, know that provider is going to retire sooner than later, and then of course look to backfill with whatever appropriate staff you have. But bottom line is, I think we're going to see deal activity continue to increase here on both fronts, and that's a good thing.
That's a great thing. That's a great thing. All right. Well, Polymarket, I got a text from Polymarket. They've put, when we do episode 5 here soon, will Peter still have his beard after suffering through some 100-degree August days here in North Texas? So we'll have to tune in next time.
Yeah, we'll see what the action is on it right before we.
That's right, to find out. So thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you next time.
To learn more about Buxton, visit our website at buxtonco.com.